What's the situation on used machinery? Are prices going up? Did interest rates have an impact on this? And if you're considering buying, should you do that now or should you wait? These are just some of the discussions we're going to cover in this edition of Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve podcast, where we cut your learning curve with insights you can apply immediately to your farming operation. This episode is presented by Loveland Products. When it comes to crop inputs, you need products that are field proven to deliver both results and value. For more than 50 years, Loveland Products has been providing farmers with high performance, value-driven product solutions designed to maximize productivity on every acre. Visit lovelandproducts.com to see how their innovative products can help you farm more profitably. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, thanks for joining us for another fantastic episode of Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve. We got Jeff Willie on here with Dumas Auction Service out of Wellman, Iowa. Jeff and I were in Iowa together this past weekend, and we were discussing the job that he does working in the auction business. And I said, you know what's going on with iron? A few years ago, we talked about how you couldn't even get stuff, and then the whole pandemic, and then there was supply chain problems, and then you couldn't get parts, but also you couldn't get new stuff. So there's been kind of a marketplace in turmoil from an outsider's perspective. Admittedly, you that are listening to this probably buy more farm machinery than I do. I have a Kubota 47 horse utility tractor and some attachments that go on the back of it. So admittedly, you're probably closer to it. And obviously, Jeff is the expert here, not me. That's why I said, let's come on the air and let's talk about this. So in a nutshell, hasn't it been kind of ag got really good in the last couple of years? So there's money. That usually means that machinery, farmers like to spend and update machinery when they make money. Also, we had a bit of a turmoil in the marketplace where there was stuff not being available. So kind of take me over the last couple of years of what's going on. Then we'll get to actual trends right now in terms of the money prices.
Sure, right. Yeah, thanks, Damian. Yeah, you're right. You touched on a lot of it. Back when the pandemic hit, we couldn't get things. Guys were getting what they could get and what they needed to get by with. I had a neighbor that was wanting a brand new quad-track tractor, couldn't get it, went to a year-old quad-track and with low hours on it. Yeah, things on the used side are doing really well, or selling really well.
Still, and by the way, we're recording this first week of August in 2023. So depending on when you listen to it, you might say, oh, that sounds outdated. Well, right now, things are doing very well, you're telling me.
Yes. Yeah. Again, and the bottom line on farmers is, they're going to watch their bottom line. And the interest rates right now have crept up through the bank, but also the companies, the big manufacturers, are not offering that attractive of interest rates for new equipment to buy from them. They used to be, but that's not the way it is right now. So farmers, of course, if you can buy a 5 to 8 year old tractor that you can get the technology in it that you want, and if you can buy that tractor at maybe 3/4 of the price of a new one, have less interest rate, that's going to help their bottom line. Or not less interest rate, but less interest to make their payments a little less.
Yeah, the rate remains the same, but if you're shaving a couple $100,000, which really on these machines of today, you might be shaving $200,000 off of the price by grabbing a few years old.
You bet, and that not only goes for tractors and combines, but tillage and planters. I mean, it's a thing where, like I said, the big thing these days, I think, or now is if you can get the technology you want on some of those things. And a lot of them can be retroactive onto some years or to some years. The other part I think about on the used equipment is, a lot of farmers don't want to have to deal with the diesel fluid exhaust fluid, or the DEF.
Yeah. So,
and they haven't dealt with that. So.
Yeah, so answer me this. The DEF thing, I've heard this before. It's a real thing, and it's from equipment of a certain year and newer, but then if you have an older one, you don't have to fool with all that. It's an environmental thing. When's the cutoff?
I believe it's 2016, Damien. It was when that all took place. So we've been dealing with it for a while, and that's probably what it's about in that same area where the used equipment has taken off. Like I said, if they've never had to deal with it, they don't want to, or if they do deal with it, they know what it's like, and they still don't want to.
That props up the value then of 7-year-old machines, but that's going to become less and less of a point as we get further away from the year 2016 model year. So when we talk about the interest rates, we're talking about a doubling. And I explain this all the time. And people say, oh, interest rates went up by 4%. No, the truth is they went up by 100%. In terms of, if you look at money as a input, if it was 4% money and now it's 8%, let's just say, that's rough numbers. That's a doubling of interest, which means if you're buying a $500,000 piece of equipment or $1 million piece of equipment, which there are farm machines that are $1 million piece of equipment, you're talking about paying a heck of a lot more interest. Then you'd say, well, that should probably tend to prop up lesser priced stuff, which means the used market. But the used market was already going pretty damn gangbusters before the interest rate. So help me understand that.
Well, I don't know if there was a time in there where maybe it was going to tail off a little bit, Damien, and we got into this situation, or like I said, the farmer just looking at that bottom dollar all the time, that bottom line, and saying, hey, why spend that $500,000 on a combine? I can get one here that's probably in that $300,000 to $400,000 range and get set up. I can still get the technology I want, a low-hour machine, and it'll still do what I was looking at. I maybe there's better times. A farmer's mentality is, well, the next crop or the next year is always going to be better.
What you're seeing at these auctions, there you are, and I'm talking about machinery in particular. Let's not talk about household goods or, selling the estate shop. When we talk about this machinery, like you said, maybe it was going to taper off, and then the interest rates put a fire back under it again. Wasn't there a time, I'm almost thinking like 4 years ago, there was a time when used combines were getting darn cheap because there was a glut of them. And I remember someone telling me that, but again, I'm not in the auction ring like you are. Did used combines go through a lull there a few years ago?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what it was, but and then that backed up the new combines. There was a lot of guys buying those new machines, running them for a year, and then trade them in and get a new one, and their payment would remain the same. Well, some of the dealers couldn't move that 1-year-old machine on the backside, and that kind of hurt things. And they were making some pretty good deals. And again, they lowered their interest rate a little bit on that to make it more attractive for those 1-year-old machines. And that's where we ran into some problem on that end.
What is slow? Okay, so combines are not slow. You're telling me that in the used market, used combines are holding up well, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's slow? Tractors? Sprayers? Small equipment?
I would say sprayers, because there's not a lot of guys that have got those self-propelled sprayers yet. I think those have backed off somewhat. But everything else seems to be going, if you've got a used piece of equipment in your shed and you're thinking about either updating or maybe don't need it anymore, I would say right now is an awful good time to be moving that on. Now, when I say good used, I mean being able to pull it out of that shed, get a good cleaning, don't come around it with the rattle can spray can.
Yeah.
Weld on it, it's something that looks pretty good just in its everyday clothes. And that'll really, I think you'll be satisfied with the prices it brings.
Yeah. What about the reality that we're going to make a little less money this year? Yes, last year was a record year at the farm gate, and so we're not going to be in record, but we are projected to be in positive territory. Do you see a slowing or a cooling from last year? Was there a whole bunch of people there at the end of the year trying to get rid of their gains?
Yeah, there is some of that, but that's every year with a farmer. They're always that way. I don't know is that this year's going to be any different. If it'll slow down, maybe that may help that used equipment again. It may bump that bottom line up, bump that the amount they'll pay for that used equipment, bump that up a little higher yet. We may see less variance between good used, and new equipment. It only takes two at an auction, and things get kind of crazy.
Right. Well, you're talking about what you see in Iowa, which is obviously pretty good bellwether. What are you hearing from the other states? Is it different state to state, or is it kind of the same story? And I'm talking generally in the ag belt.
Right. From what I've been hearing, it's pretty good everywhere for the used equipment. It depends on a little bit on weather. Now, where I'm at in central Iowa, east central Iowa, we're going through a little bit of a dry period now. Things may slow down, back off a little bit with that. But I think going forward on any of the other places that have good weather, the race will be on.
Yeah. So if there's a little bit of a slowdown, I don't know this, and you probably do. If we start in say 2024, 2025, see years that and it happens, I've got a chart. I have a chart right over here, in fact, of the farm income numbers, and it's pretty remarkable. You'd say, oh, well, we're not going to go back. I've got this chart right here, Jeff, and I won't bore you, but I'm holding it up. If you're listening, driving down the road, know that I just put this graph up. But the point is, this year we're projected to be $137 billion of farm revenue. We're $163 billion of farm income last year. And to put that in perspective, in just 2019, we were at less than half of that. In 2019, we were less than half of what we were in 2022. So it can change quickly. You know what I mean? So if we do something like that, if we go down to being like 80 billion or 90 billion of farm revenue, farm income here in another couple of years, who gets hurt the most? Is it the person that should have sold their used stuff, or is it the John Deere and the Case and the New Holland dealer down the road?
I think John Deere and Case, New Holland, they're all going to be okay if we go backwards a little bit. But I think they may see a little bit of tightening of their belts a little bit. Their quarterly reports may come back a little bit not so favorable to them. I think everything will back down a little bit on that situation if that happens. When and if that happens, if anybody tells you they can predict that, I think they're selling you a bag of goods. But yeah, if it does, I think the top end stuff, the more expensive stuff, again, being a farmer myself, that's where we cut first. We'll maybe do with it another year or look for something used. Again, good used equipment.
One of the companies we work with is Fent, and they're part of AGCO, and they, pretty advanced machines over in Europe. The guy that rents my farmland is a dairyman, and he was fast to adopt and bring Fence over from Europe before they were even here in Mass. At the used level, are you seeing more of that? I mean, are you seeing more of these like European machines, or maybe a Klaus or a Fent or something like that? Or is there still a resistance? I know that obviously those people where you are probably really bleed green, but there's some really good machines out there that aren't John Deere's.
Yeah. And we do see a little bit in that in our area. We had a pretty good McCormick run there for a while. We do see a little bit of that. And, there's some people that really enjoy it, like the McCormick. They're doing all right. Yeah, I think, we see a little bit of the smaller brands. The Fent in our area, like you said, hasn't been much yet. McCormick, Massey seems to be making a little bit of a comeback on that end. But that's about all we have around in this area.
You had advice for the person that says, okay, I need to buy stuff. If it's your money, what do you think right now? Here we are, late summer of 2023, and in the next year, you've got to make some equipment decisions. Do you pull the trigger now because it's going to get more expensive? Is there an inflationary trend going on here, or does it get more reasonable moving forward because of some market forces? What's your thought?
Well, Damian, let's be one thing for sure before we go any further. I'm not a banker or an economist. I never said I have, never will be, but I think, with the doing the auctions, the less competition is always more beneficial for you. So I think if you can see it coming down the road and can get something bought now, I think you'll be better off. However, and having said that, our machinery markets or our machinery auctions haven't really started yet. We're probably looking into that September, October, where we'll start getting a little busier with those. But if you can get those bought, I think before the end of the years, because I don't know about you, but I'm a procrastinator. A lot of guys out there.
Okay. Yes, so I want to ask you the last couple of remaining questions about marketplace and your predictions, and we're going to do rapid fire. Before we do that, I want to ask the listener: do you know that last year's corn stalks retain 80% of the potassium, 40% of the phosphorus, and 30% of the nitrogen that you applied to last year's corn crop? So the point is, what you're putting on your fields right now, what you put on in the fall, what you put on in the spring, what you're putting on in the summer, all of that is going to be tied up in all of your residue. So why don't you save money and boost your yields by extracting last year's fertility for this year's crop? How? You do that by applying Extract to your residue. Extract is a product from Loveland Products. Visit Loveland Products or contact your local Nutrient Ag Solutions representative. Basically, you're just talking about getting the fertility that you've already spent the money on, that's already in that residue, and getting it back in an available source for this year's crop. Okay. You talked about categorically, and I want to see, okay, utility tractors. And now that's obviously grown. Utility tractors used to be like 20, 30 horsepower stuff. Now you're talking about 80, 90, 100 horsepower stuff. Utility tractors or something with a loader on it. Hot or not hot?
Hot, and I think will remain that way because we've got a lot of people buying acreages, still do, and they're going to need that little tractor to clean the driveways in the winter and do things that they may want to do around. So I think we're pretty good there.
Okay, so utility tractor, that's smaller scale utility tractors. Then we get into the bigger stuff that livestock people. There's less livestock in the countryside. There's the same number of livestock, but it's more consolidated. Did that take away demand for the larger loader tractors, or are they still hot?
Well, like you said, they're the same amount of head out there. It's just less people, so that means their operations are growing. They're going to need those bigger tractors with those bigger loaders and stuff like that to handle what they've got. We've seen a little bit of interest on end loaders, the articulated steering end loaders, and that's kind of a new category that's kind of coming into the ag market.
You're talking about like something that would resemble almost a small payloader, as we used to call it?
Yes. Yeah. End loader, payloader. Yeah. Kind of depends on where you're at in the country, what you'd call it.
Yeah. And that's going to be for mostly livestock type operations?
Yeah. I think.
Okay. Then speaking of, scale, I know a bunch of farmers that in the old days would have never had this. Now they have some excavating equipment because they do all their own, they manage their own drainage, they do their own fixes and tile work, etc. On the farm market, are you seeing, excavators, mini excavators, and that kind of equipment come through? I would think that it's getting bought and sold somewhere.
Yeah, mini excavators have been hot now for, I would say, 3 to 5 years, for the last 3 to 5 years. Easier to move around. On your place, you don't need the big low boys, the big semis, but takes you a little bit longer to get it done. But there has been a step up in that the bigger track hoe, what I call a track hoe, the excavators, dozers, crawlers. They're really, there's a lot of guys doing that. And a lot of it is because, the guys that own them and do that for a living can't service everybody in that fall time when the farm needs it. So that's where some of it's been picked up. And if they're doing any amount of it, it would pay to maybe have your own.
Yeah, that's probably an issue of time that you're talking about that I've seen more and more, where you've got the timing issue where the farm operator says, I want to get this done. Well, the 3 excavators that they normally do business with are slammed, so that's why it justifies doing that stuff. Skid loaders. My brother, the dairyman, once made the point that we never had as much of a problem with surplus dairy products in this country until skid loaders became ubiquitous on America's dairy farms, because it made you so much more productive and it made the work easier. Instead of it being completely backbreaking, it was only partially backbreaking. Skid loaders moving well?
Yeah. Again, good ones. We recently had an auction with the skid loader on it. Maybe didn't bring what we felt it should be, where it should be. But again, some of it is size. It needed some tires on it, and then tires are a big issue, so that hurt it some. But the skid loader, it's like the forklifts now too. If you don't have one, you wonder when you get one, you wonder how you got along without it. It's a deal.
I have forks that I put on the front of my utility tractor, and I've been doing that for a long time out here at this farm. And all the repairs and all the stuff that you do, even putting a skid on it, then you can get up and do high stuff. It's almost used like a scissors lift. I've wondered exactly how did I get by without these forks for so long? Then you talked about combines. Combines are hot again, and I swear I remember that there was a situation where we thought we had overproduced new combines and we had glutted the market. And you're telling me that doesn't seem to be the case. The movement is still fine.
Well, it was tough getting those new combines out to the producers for a while because we couldn't get the technology from China or wherever the story was on that. I think they maybe scaled back. I think a little bit on the producing of them of the combines, so that's helped us a little bit. The new combines, when you're talking $500,000, and it's quite an expense even for the guys running a lot of acres. I've seen a lot of guys that run. We're trading every year. And maybe it's every 2 years.
Right. I'm not sure $1,500,000 would grab you a new.
No, not set up with both heads and ready to go. No.
Okay, and then the one area that you see softening, you said sprayers a little bit soft, and so in the used market, the areas of softness are where?
I would say that the single-use sprayers, in other words, just a sprayer. There's a lot of variance in those on what you have and what you need. We're looking at a lot of foliage spraying over the top. Some of the sprayers aren't tall enough for that, so that's kind of softened that market up there a little bit too, I think, Damian.
And you said that planting equipment, I did a segment with the Extreme Ag guys, and there's this obsession that you've got to have new. Farmers love to go and kick the bricks. Go to the farm machinery show in Louisville, and thank God they're just like little kids at a Candyland walking around down there. But
right.
Kelly Garrett has a combine that's 11 years old, but it's been updated and retrofitted a couple of times with the modern technology. So you actually could make the case for buying a used planting piece of equipment as long as you put the right updates on it.
Right, and I think that's when you're talking about, they go to the farm shows and they look at these planters with all the updates and the seed firmers and the inrows and the electric clutches or the clutches in it and everything, for point rows and everything. I think they look at that and say, hey, how can I put this on my existing planter?
Mm-hmm.
It's sitting at that farm show on the new planter. Can I make this work on my planter, or is it something that I'm going to have to update to a new planter?
And to your point, it's the planters are holding up okay at the farm sales.
Yeah, and a planter. We've got the bulk fill from the row, filling every row has made some of that a change. Again, it depends on the acreage, but a lot of guys like to fill that bulk tank and not have to worry about every row. It makes it a little faster filling.
What about drills? You talk about planting equipment. 30 years ago or so, there was a lot of more drilled beans and drilling going on. And it seems to me that unless you're I'm guessing you don't see that many of them anymore.
No, we don't see a whole lot of them, but if we do, there's a lot of interest in them for a couple of reasons. A lot of guys, doing waterways, doing turn strips, buffer strips, also the interseeding, where we go in, or for the cover crop. Mm-hmm. That's made it for a huge comeback for those drills. We don't get one in. If we get one in, there's a lot of interest in it.
Okay. And then generally are no-till, so to be no-till drills, or does that matter?
Doesn't seem to matter a whole lot. Guys will take the extra time, get it put in, with incorporated or get it worked out beforehand in the fall. It doesn't seem to matter a whole bunch. A no-till is just a little bit of a bonus.
Mm-hmm. And then what did I not ask about? Oh, you talked about tillage equipment. It seems to me that 1/3 of all the farmsteads in America have an old style moldboard plow sitting around, and they should have gone to an auction, and then there was no more demand for them except for the scrapyard. Is tillage equipment? Are you seeing as much of it? I would like to think that we're doing less tillage, which is good for the ground. So that means there should be less used tillage equipment coming around or having demand for it. What are you saying?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit less for that, but some of the fall equipment that we use, maybe the deep till with the disc on it, or something like that we can get done in the fall, doesn't put as much pressure on the spring. You still, a lot of guys think, hey, we still got to tear that up 2-3 years, get something worked out. So that fall tillage equipment has been pretty sustained, pretty good.
I'm generally of the opinion that there should never be such a thing as fall tillage being done, but it's not me that's paying $15,000 for the acre of ground to let it to plow it up and let it wash away. So what the hell do
Yeah.
I? What thing did I not ask about? What thing is happening? You're in there, you're on the auction block, or you're in the ring. What thing are you seeing that I've forgotten to ask?
Well, I think some of the things that we touch on or that we think about on the auction is a lot of the online auctions. It's a great aspect to have an online auction.
Mhm.
But when we have our auctions, we usually have it in person and online at the same time. And we've got a lot of guys that they still like to kick the tires and feel the steel, we call it. They like to be out there and seeing that piece, and they'll drive some pretty good distances just to see that because we are still live
Yep.
and on the internet. The internet has helped us big on that end. But I know one of our recent auctions, I think we only had of the bigger pieces of equipment, we probably only had about 15 to 20% that weren't sold on the ground.
Yeah, so only 15 to 20% were internet. The rest of them were people that were right there. I'm kind of I'm a traditionalist like this. I mean, it's one thing to go on Amazon and buy a pair of slippers, but I'm not sure that I'd want to do the online auction thing. I also have been to auctions, and I told myself I'm not going to bid against the phone. I just don't feel right about that. I'm like, I don't know. This guy might over here just be calling time and temperature and pretending he's talking to a bidder. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that. Okay. So from the auction standpoint, you're still seeing a lot of in person. You still see a lot of action, and it's not as though it's not as though there's a softening right now in where you are. So yeah, we're coming into generally a lot more of this stuff happens between about November and March.
Yeah,
Right?
we'll start picking up here in September, October. Then it'll taper off a little bit during harvest for us at that time. And November, December, we'll get some. After the first of the year, even we'll get some interest in some selling some stuff if they're getting close to being ready to retire or changing something or things like that.
That's the last question I got for you. There's been discussion since I was a child about the aging American farmer, and then there's the consolidation thing. And so then the question is, okay, are we really going to see this thing where a whole bunch of older, smaller equipment gluts the market? And I've been hearing about it for a long time, but it seems as though it's not ever been a real thing, is it?
The older stuff, for instance, I still have a 4240 John Deere. Now we're getting into that's where somebody wants to redo it.
Yeah.
Polish it like the one they have it restored. And that's kind of a neat thing. And it also goes back to those are also popular for that acreage guy.
Uh-huh.
Maybe wants to have a few cattle. Maybe still needs something to level off the yard and move the snow.
Clip the pastures.
You betcha.
The person with 40 acres in the country and a dream and a job in town still needs so they can buy that. What you're talking about is like a 40-year-old cab tractor.
You bet. Yeah. And that's helped that market. And you also get those older fellas in there that want to have they maybe had one, their dad had one, or they
Yeah.
used one at one time. Yeah. You know, the sentimental value is still good and strong in the auction business.
So in 1967, I think it would be, or 68, Oliver 1850, we had on the farm growing up. I've said that I'm going to buy one of those for sentimental reasons because that's where part of my hearing went, was on that Oliver 1850. The problem is that means I got to keep one more thing running. So I've stayed out of the sentimental market for that purpose.
Right, right. And finding that 1850 Oliver right now might be a tough part. You know, they weren't made for a whole long time, and it's been a long time since they were made. So, you know, if you can find one, the old saying is, you're going to drive your wheels off, boys, to find one. Holds true.
Yeah, but now that I know that you're an auction guy and you like to sell stuff, you'll be calling me next week saying, "Damien, you wouldn't believe it, but guess what? I guess what I just consigned. I just consigned an auction, an Oliver 1850."
I'll tell you what, Damien, that's my job right there.
That's right. That's right. So I'll have a flatbed pulling in here with a 55-year-old tractor here in another few days. All right. His name's Jeff Willie. We're talking about what we're seeing out there. So I guess that's our parting shot. Is there anything else I need to know? You said go ahead and you think buy now. You're not just saying that because you're the auctioneer, but seriously, 1 year from now, I know none of us have a crystal ball. You think these numbers hold up 1 year from now on the used?
If they do fall off, Damien, it's not going to be a really, really drastic fall off. You know, I think maybe if our interest rates tick up again, or it depends on where you're at again. If your numbers are down, maybe your yield isn't quite as good,
Mhm.
You know, as you thought. That may hurt it some, but you still need to keep updated. You know, and it's cheaper than new.
His name's Jeff Willie. Dua's Auction Service out of Wellman, Iowa. I suppose you could look them up at Dua's Auction Service. I suppose they have a website. Yeah.
We do have a website. Yep.
All right, go to find Dua's, DUWA, Dua's Auction Service. This episode was brought to you by our good friends over at Loveland Products. Make sure you check out all the cool stuff they have. His name's Jeff Willie. My name's Damien Mason. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Damien.
Always a pleasure. We'll do this again in another year, and we'll see if your predictions are right. Until next time.
I don't know if I like that idea.
Until next time, this is Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Extreme Ag's Cutting the Curve. But there is plenty more available by visiting extremeag.farm. For over 50 years, farmers have turned to the proven lineup of crop inputs offered by Loveland products. From seed treatments, plant nutrition, adjuvant, and crop protection products, Loveland has the complete lineup to keep your farming operation productive and, most importantly, profitable. Check out lovelandproducts.com to learn more.